Hi everybody, my name is Maya. If you're new, welcome. If you're not new, welcome back. I'm so excited to have you today. We are going to be talking about another of my least favorite tropes of all time, and that trope just happens to be
the strong female lead. Dun dun dun!
Margaret Atwood is a writer whose work I would consider to be highly feminist because it deals with women's rights. And when people think of feminism, they think of the advocacy for women's rights, even though my personal definition of feminism is the equalities of all sexes and genders. But Margaret Atwood does not want to be labeled as a feminist writer. The IrishTimes.com has a handy-dandy quote from Margaret Atwood that I'd like to share with you all now. Margaret Atwood wants to know what you mean when you call her a feminist writer. Quote, "Tell me what you mean. I don't sign blank checks. Do you mean I'm a 1972 feminist who felt that women were betraying their gender to have sex with men? I'm not that kind of feminist. And I'm not the kind that thinks trans women are not women. So you tell me what you mean, and I'll tell you if I am one." I think that is actually a fair thing to ask because our media has really skewed the definition of feminism. I'm sure you guys have heard the term feminazi. I think it's incredibly problematic because it belittles the heart of the movement and it portrays the fight for equality as somehow demonic. Of course, you also have the issue of intersectional feminism. I'm a huge advocate for intersectional feminism. There is no feminism if you're excluding people from the conversation. Feminism is about, for me, the equality of the sexes and all genders, and because of that, everyone who is a human really needs to be a part of the conversation. Men need to advocate for women need to advocate for women, white women should not be at the heart of the issue. We should also be talking about women of color, minorities, women of religious minorities, disabled women, sex workers, trans women, etc., women belonging to the LGBTQ plus community. It's really important that feminism is inclusive. It is to me just another element of human rights. All humans are humans and ought to have human rights. All genders and sexes are human and ought to have human rights. Unfortunately, they don't, which is why we have a term like feminism and a group of people who call themselves feminists who are advocating for social change and justice and equality. I'm sure you guys have all heard of the strong female lead. I'm sure you've all encountered the strong female lead. She's not hard to find. Karina Chocano in the New York Times wrote an article in 2011 about why she really dislikes the term strong female lead. And she described the strong female lead conventionally as tough, cold, terse, taciturn, scowls, doesn't say goodbye when she hangs up the phone. And that's pretty much accurate. The first person that comes to mind for me is Katniss Everdeen. Personally, I found Katniss to be a really boring protagonist because there was nothing relatable to her at all for me except for the fact that she loves her sister. And that was literally it. The idea of the strong female lead in media today is portrayed as a woman who is strong despite being a woman, not a woman who is strong and a woman. It is looking down on traditionally feminine things, ideas, and portrayals of identity. Currently, I am reading The Game of Thrones, or maybe it's A Game of Thrones, or maybe it's just Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. I'm enjoying it. It is problematic in several ways. I will have a video on the Game of Thrones, A Game of Thrones, Game of Thrones tomorrow for you all. But today I want to talk about two of the main characters. This is pretty much spoiler-free. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about them. The first character we've got here is Arya Stark. She is my favorite character in the book. I really love the chapters she is narrating. Arya is a character that rejects all things feminine. She wants to be a fighter. She is she's always referred to as a boy, and she pretty much just generally holds the same dignity as all of the men in the series. On the other hand, you've got her sister, Sansa Stark, and Sansa is very traditionally feminine. She is probably my least favorite character in this novel, not because she's traditionally feminine, but because she's kind of slow and naive. Because Sansa is one of the least liked overall characters in the show and in the novel, and because she's pretty much the only female character who displays traditionally female traits, such as really liking fancy dresses, she really loves dancing, she really wants to be a bride, she wants to be a mother, all that jazz. Because Sansa is such a disliked character in the show, people will naturally equate her traits with being bad. This is not an uncommon thing. We often have a stark, get it, black and white contrast between women in media. You've got the woman who rejects all things traditionally feminine. You've got the woman that embraces all things traditionally feminine. Usually, the one that rejects them is stronger. Usually, the one that follows the norms is weaker. See the problem? Overall, the strong female lead plays up traits that are traditionally masculine and portrays power and strength in a very physical manner. They're very one-dimensional characters, and the stories that portray them often imply that femininity and strength are somehow mutually exclusive. And I think that sends a really terrible message not only to young girls, but also full-grown women in our society. The website Fearless, she wrote, says that the current modern-day portrayal of a strong woman equates strength with badassery. And clearly, not every female lead or character is going to be badass, because not every female in the world is badass, and that's totally fine. That doesn't make her story any less interesting or valid than anyone else's. This pretty much results in a spawn of cliches. For me, that is pretty much literally everything I read between the grades 4th and 7th. I'm talking about YA, folks. YA is super popular on BookTube. I'm not gonna bash it. I enjoy YA. But YA female protagonists suck. Of course, I'm generalizing. I know there are exceptions, but generally, when I think of YA, I think of Katniss Everdeen, I think of Triss, whatever her last name was, I think of the characters from dystopian stories who are shown as stoic. But they're strong, don't get me wrong, but they're not vulnerable. You cannot relate to them because they are going through horrific experiences, and they're also completely emotionally closed off. It's kind of the epitome of the not like other girls trope, which I think's pretty much the same thing. The strong female lead is strong because she does not like what other girls like. The strong female lead is strong because instead of knowing how to sew, she can sword fight. The strong female lead is attractive because she's conventionally beautiful, but she doesn't rely on her beauty or think of her beauty as a personality trait. No. In fact, it gets in the way of who she is at the core, which is a taciturn, sad, scowling fighter. There is absolutely nothing wrong with female characters who are tomboys. There's also nothing wrong with female characters who are quote-unquote girly girls. In school, in elementary school, if you were a girly girl, you were looked down on big time. If you did not have a neon chartreuse Under Armour hoodie, you were not cool, ladies. And that's so messed up. What someone likes to wear, what someone enjoys doing with their free time, says nothing about their strength or integrity as an individual. It says nothing about their values and their morals, about their life experience. It says nothing about their intelligence, about their capacity to deal with difficult situations or resolved conflict. It pretty much has nothing to do with them as what I'm looking for in a character. I want my characters to be human. They don't have to be actually human. I love Charlotte's Web, but they need to be human in the way that they need to be vulnerable. They need to be flawed. They cannot be perfect characters because perfection is not relatable. Strong female leads to me are girls that I can relate with. An example that pops into my mind is Lara Jean Covey. She is much more the traditional girly girl than many of the YA female leads I have read, and I relate to her infinitely more than Katniss Everdeen. On the other hand, you've got Cinder, who is from the Lunar Chronicles, who is physically strong. She's a fighter. She's really tough. But I relate to her because she's vulnerable. She's actually a person with dimensions and a history, and she makes mistakes, and she's real. I like real, guys. That's literally all I want. The strong female lead has become a cliche. She is boring. There's nothing relatable about her, and she's pretty much just a hot manifestation of conventionally male traits. While there's nothing wrong with being more masculine than feminine, there's also nothing wrong with being feminine, and our media does a really bad job at portraying that balance. Lead characters that are strong and female, not strong despite being female. Thank you so much for watching today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. I will see you all tomorrow for a not spoiler-free review of The Game of Thrones, A Game of Thrones, Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. So I will see you all tomorrow. Let me know in the comments down below the tropes you hate. I'd love to hear them. And yeah, see ya. Have a good day.